Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Holy, holy is He. Sing a new song to Him who sits on heaven's mercy seat. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. Clothing rainbows of living color, flashes of lightning, rose and thunder, blessing in honor, strength and glory and power be to you, the only wise King. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. Filled with wonder, awe-struck wonder at the mention of your name. Jesus, your name is power, breath and living water, such a marvelous mystery. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you.
Everyone needs compassion, a love that's never failing. Let mercy follow me. Everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of a Savior, the hope of nations. Savior, He can move the mountains. is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Out of our salvation, He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So take me as you find me, along my feet the figures, and fill my life again. I give you my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Out of our salvation, He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine a light, let the whole world see. Sing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine a light, let the whole world see. Sing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Out of our salvation, He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine a light, let the whole world see. Sing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine a light, let the whole world see. Sing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine a light, let the whole world see. For the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine a light, let the whole world see. Sing for the glory of the risen King.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome if you're just now clicking in to join us. My name is Ryan Phipps. I'm the senior minister here at Church in Bethesda. Let's get into our lesson for today. Today we are beginning a series called Field Notes for Seekers. This series will address some questions that it seems every generation asks. Questions like, who or what is God? Which religion is the right religion? Why is there evil in the world? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? What happens after we die, etc., etc. We did our very best to make sure that we got a field notes notebook to you in the mail. If you didn't receive one from us, if you would email your address to office@churchinbethesda.org. Again, that's office@churchinbethesda.org. Send us your mailing address, and we will put a field notes notebook in the mail for you this week. One thing about the notebooks, though, and if you got this, you were probably wondering this, and when you receive one, you'll probably be thinking the same thing. Why are they so tiny? And why is there nothing written in them? This is intentional, I assure you, because they are field notes. They are as they are for you to take notes while you're out in the field of human life. And I want to encourage you to keep these little books on your person throughout the remainder of the series during the week. And as you're processing all that we've been studying here on Sundays, take a minute to jot down what you're thinking about in them during the week. If you do this, I promise that it will help you further unpack the big ideas in your head that we're beginning to unpack here on Sundays. Finally, in the very last Sunday of this series, we'll be doing a Q&A here, and we need you to submit your questions ahead of time so that I might attempt to answer them. You can also send those questions as they arise throughout this series to office@churchinbethesda.org. So if you have a question that keeps surfacing and it doesn't seem like we're addressing it, let us know. Now, today I want to begin our series by addressing perhaps the most essential batch of questions in this entire series. Questions about the existence of God. Does God exist? If so, who or what is God? Is God male or female? Is God personal or impersonal? Does God have tastes and preferences and opinions? Is God good? Is God evil? Is God both good and evil? These are just a few of the many questions, and I imagine that we have others. I certainly do too. But I want to start today by asking you to write something down in your field notes notebooks. Here's what I want you to write. Week 1, semicolon. God is that in which all that exists exists. Again, God is that in which all that exists exists. Scripture speaks of God this way, but it's easy to overlook with all of the stories and lessons and metaphors, and particularly the way that we were raised to think of God in the homes that we grew up in. But one such passage that speaks of God in this way is found in the 17th chapter of the book of Acts in the New Testament. And here in this story, the Apostle Paul is addressing a group of philosophers in the city of Athens at a place called the Areopagus. And they are questioning him about his beliefs. And the passage says this. They brought Paul to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing that you worship, and this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in structures built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one blood he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that people would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. That portion of the verse is in quotation marks because Paul here is quoting the philosopher Epimenides. And then he goes on to say, as some of your own poets have said, then quotes again, we are his offspring. That's in quotes because Paul here is quoting the philosopher Aratus. So this passage is important for a few reasons. Number one, because Paul does not quote from the Torah in order to explain what he believes God is. Instead, Paul quotes from pagan sources that those listening are already familiar with. And this is huge because in doing so, Paul is demonstrating that one does not need to read his own tradition's scriptures in order to comprehend God. Number two, this passage is important because it attempts to explain God not as a being, but more as a place, an environment that makes being even possible at all in the first place. Paul says, quoting Epimenides, "For in him we live and move and have our being." And then number three, finally, this passage is important because if it's true that God is not realized by reading from Paul's tradition, and that God is not a being, but that which makes being possible, then God is, quote, not far from any one of us. And so challenging our thinking about God as a being, as a person, as a mind, or even a spirit, lowercase l, is paramount here as we look at these questions about the existence of God. There's a wonderful thinker by the name of Paul Tillich. He's no longer alive now, but he was a professor at Union Seminary during his career. And Tillich was fond of calling God the ground of being. The ground of being. And what he meant by that was that God does not exist in things. Rather, things exist in God. And that is helpful to me, thinking of God as the ground of being. Think about that phrase for a second, the ground of being. I want you to close your eyes for a second. Go ahead, it's okay, I'm not going to trick you or anything. Close your eyes. And as you do, I want you to imagine with me a big, big piece of ground. It's full of grass and flowers and trees and big, beautiful rolling hills. It's like many other pieces of ground. It's filled with living creatures, insects, birds, animals, worms, even human beings. This piece of ground that you have in your mind sustains an ecosystem that gives life to all the creatures in it and on it. The plants there feed on the soil. The worms there feed on the plants. The birds there feed on the worms. The humans there feed on a nice meal of chicken cooked over the wood that they chop down from trees. And they've made a salad from the greens that are growing out in the field. The bees are buzzing around the people while they're enjoying their meal of birds and greens, flying from flower to flower, gathering nectar, pollinating the plants that end up growing more plants to feed on the soil, that feed on the worms, that feed on the birds, that feed the humans. And round the circle goes. It never stops. It goes on forever. All of these creatures exist and survive and are sustained by this piece of ground that you have a picture of in your mind. Okay, now open your eyes. God is like that. God is like that piece of ground. This ground has no opinions or preferences. It doesn't play favorites. It's not personal. It doesn't pick and choose which species get to survive and how they go on about their surviving. It simply offers itself as an environment where creatures and things can grow and live and age and die and live again. There is joy and sorrow. There is safety and terror and stress and calm, earthquakes, sunshine, snow, rain, hail, tornadoes, celebrations, dinner parties, heavy machinery, medicines that heal, and illegal narcotics that destroy. Wars and treaties. All that we call good and all that we call bad, it all happens on and because of this piece of ground. This is what God is like. This God is not served by human hands as if this God needed anything. Rather, this God gives everyone life and breath and everything else. For in this God we live and move and have our being. And if this is true, then it means that your very worst enemy, the person who lied to you and lied about you, the person who took advantage of you and takes advantage of you, the person who says that all that you think and all that you believe is skewed and distorted and that you can't see the world as you should, it means that even this person is alive by the same agency as you are. It means that God doesn't take sides, because taking sides is the behavior of creatures. All that God does is exist. And in that existence, we have the ability to exist and the ability to choose what we do with that existence. We choose what we believe is right or wrong. We choose who is in and who is out. We determine which religion we think is the most correct. We make discriminations. God doesn't do it. The creatures do. We do. God just is. And this is where we must start. And this is where we must revisit again and again as the launch pad of our thinking when it comes to God. Because if we don't start here, we will only ever find ourselves believing in a God that coincidentally confirms all of our biases. We must come back to this again and again. God is that in which all that exists, exists. Period. Now, can we grow from here? Can we elaborate from here? Yes. But we have to have our feet on the ground. Capital G. And you might be thinking, well, but what about Jesus? What about Christianity? What about my Bible? Are those things not important? Yes, of course they are. And I understand the fervency, the need to answer those questions. But to borrow from Lewis, I am not yet within 100 miles of the God of Christian theology. All I have got to is a something, capital S. And we will get into some of those questions in the coming weeks, but we can't start with them. We must start with that which makes a world where people are asking questions like that even possible. And so that is where I would like us to stop for today. Even if it leaves us feeling a little unsettled, it's okay. The world will keep turning. The sun will rise and set tomorrow, even in our unsettledness. So this week, as you go out into your life and all that your life brings, remember that God is that in which all that exists, exists. Even you. Let that vex you. Let that trouble you. Let that free you. Let that strengthen you and encourage you. It should do all of those things if you take it to heart deeply enough. It's all part of living a life that is rooted in reality rather than fantasy. As we move into a time of reflection now, I want to invite you to just let all of that slosh around in your head for a minute. And as you do, I want you to begin to open your heart and your mind to the idea that maybe you don't have all the answers. Maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe we don't have all of this figured out. And perhaps this week you might go out into your life with that posture, a posture of seeking, a posture of wonder, a posture of awe. And maybe we'll see some things about our lives and our beliefs and our relationships that we never have before. If you'd like to receive the Eucharist with us, you can gather the elements at your home at this time. If you don't have wine and unleavened bread, that's okay. Whatever you have to use is sufficient. But let's spend a few moments in stillness and reflection, thinking on the things we've heard here today. Amen.
morning, CIB. My name's Anna, and I am here to bring you our Just for Kids segment. First, I would like to give a big shout out to Lauren and thank her for all the great lessons she shared with us during January. This is the first Sunday in February, and February is an important month. It's actually Black History Month. And so we are going to be honoring that with our Just for Kids segment throughout the month of February. So today, Ryan shared a passage with us from the Bible, from the book of Exodus, and it was about Moses. God was calling Moses to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Moses had excuses. He didn't want to do this. He thought he wasn't good enough, but God used him. There's another important historical figure, and her nickname was Moses. It's Harriet Tubman. Her nickname was Moses because she also led many, many people out of slavery here in the United States. So I have a book that I would like to share with you now to learn a little more about Harriet Tubman today. So now Jeff is going to help me share this book about Harriet Tubman with you. Before She Was Harriet by Lisa Klein Ransom, illustrated by James E. Ransom. Here she sits, an old woman, tired and worn, her legs stiff, her back achy. But before wrinkles formed and her eyes failed, before she reached her twilight years, she could walk for miles and see clearly under a sky lit with only stars. Before she was a suffragist, she was General Tubman, rising out of the fog, armed with courage, strong in the face of rebels and planters and overseers. As they watched fields burn and bridges fall, and 700 slaves stop chopping and start running to a woman who ferried them on the Combahee River, turned River Jordan. Before she was General Tubman, she was a Union spy, carrying secrets across battlefields to soldiers, fighting in the Civil War for President Lincoln to end slavery. Before she was a Union spy, she was a nurse, caring for those hit with bullets and hatred and fear, tending to them with bandages and words in the bloodied dirt of Southern soil.
Before she was a nurse, she was Aunt Harriet, daughter of Ben and Rit, who helped her parents flee their master and find a way through woods and streams to find the safety of Canada and a new home in the north.
Before she was Aunt Harriet, she was Moses, a conductor on an underground railroad with no trains and no tracks, just passengers traveling to freedom. Up north, through swamps, past slave catchers, across rivers, under the cover of night.
Seeking the promised land for her people, led by dreams in God and faith, a wisp of a woman with the courage of a lion.
Before she was Moses, she was Minty of Maryland, of one slave owner, and then others who worked her, punished her with lashes, broke her back, but not her spirit. Before she was Minty, she was Araminta, a young girl, taught by her father to read the woods and the stars at night, readying for the day. She'd leave behind slavery along with her name and pick a new one, Harriet. And remember her days as a suffragist, as a general, as a spy, as a nurse, as Aunt Harriet, as Moses, as a conductor.
As Minty, as
Araminta,
who dreamed of living long enough to one day be old, stiff and achy, tried and worn and wrinkled and free. Both Moses and Harriet Tubman show us that everyone can make a difference. They both have long lists of reasons to not take action, but they did. And each of them made a big impact in the world. We would like to challenge you today to think about something important you can do with anyone. For example, it could be in your house, at school, at church, or in your neighborhood. Ask a grown-up to help you print the I Touch activity and draw pictures of yourself doing something important in each of these places. So this is the activity. It says in front, I can do important things. When you open it, it says in the top, I can do important things at home. I can do important things at school. There's 2 hearts, so you can write anything in the hearts. And in the back, same thing. It says, I can do important things in my neighborhood. I can do important things at church. So you can write anything in the heart in the back if you have more thoughts. You are important, and you can do important things.